just started snowing, and I've had the heater on for an hour in here, and it's 9 degrees still.
Oh man, that is super cold. Well,
It's cold.
it was it's getting winter here, right? But you know, I can't claim for it to be anywhere near as cold as there. I think we're down to 16, and everyone's still, everyone's wearing jackets. And
I'd be like, whoa.
cool.
Gosh.
Right. Well, GM, episode 2. We had a quick chat off camera. We're on now, but as said, let me just hold my little bag up. I've got this little bag here with a bunch of questions in. So I'm going to pull one out, and then we're going to pull that question apart. So it's a surprise for me as well, which makes it more fun and hopefully more fun for the audience. Oh, cool. This is a subject I don't think we've spoken about at all. And it's something that really does fascinate me. And that's free will. So it's a very debated subject in many areas, has been for a while more recently. But, you know, free will, does it really exist? Do we really have free will? Or is everything somewhat predetermined? Or are there even levels of free will, you know? The level of I'm deciding to do this podcast versus what I maybe didn't realize I decided to do based on all these other conditions in the world. So, yeah, rather than me yabber on, let's love to hear your perspective on the existence or non-existence of free will.
Yes, there is absolutely free will. It does exist, but it exists in the same way that a married couple who's been married for 10 years both have free will, but they have to combine both of their free wills in order for their lives together to be smooth and happy. In the same way, I mean, there are two of us, and I'm not talking about you and me, I'm talking about any human being. There is matter, there is spirit, there is ego, there is mind. The mind and the spirit is a non-physical entity, obviously, and that has an agenda, and it has free will to explore itself, to explore life, to do what it does with matter. That's the free will. Then you have the ego, and that free will, by the way, your spiritual free will, is unlimited. No boundaries whatsoever. The free will of the ego is a little bit different. The free will of the ego, you do have free will, but there are guidelines. For instance, a very easy for instance, in space there is a speed limit. Everyone knows this. There is a speed of light, and that's your speed limit. If you try to go past the speed limit, which you can do, but things start to change, things start to happen. Time changes, weight changes, gravity changes. My point is this, though. For that physical part of us, you do have a free will, but it is capped, because the ego can be quite ridiculous, quite stupid, quite aggressive, and quite destructive. So there are caps that will pull us back. As long as you stay within the framework of a civilized, loving, wonderful kind of a person, your free will be untouched, and you can explore your free will to every end. If you're a dickhead and an asshole and you just love to see the world burn, your free will is going to be extraordinarily limited. I'm not going to go into it, but yes, to answer your question, there is free will. We need to keep in mind, though, real quickly.
No, go for it. We got time.
There are two sorts of truth in this world. There is relative truth and absolute truth. Relative truth has everything to do with what's true to you and your life while you're around and being alive. My name is this. I'm a Caucasian. I live in this country. I pledge to that flag. I. They're all relative truths, and they die with you. The absolute truth is everything that's going on before you were born. It's going on while you're alive, and it's going on after you're dead. That's absolute truth. It doesn't change, regardless of whether you're here or not. Both are completely two different worlds, and each one has its own way of being, and each one has its own free will, and I just described how they work.
Let me just unpack that in my mind a little bit. So At the beginning of that, you talked about, I think you called it spiritual free will, right? In a different context to say ego free will. Let me try and define these things a little bit. And I know often when you put logic to these things, you lose them anyway, but let's just try. So
Let's do it.
what is talk to me about spiritual free will and the connection between that and what you called ego free will, if there is any connection, or are you talking about these things as, codependent or completely independent?
Codependent and
Okay.
independent, always. Truth is always in paradox. If there's no paradox, it's not true. Would you like an explanation of that?
Yes, please.
Here's one. Here's an example. One
Yep.
example. The only certainty in life is change. Okay, everyone can see that. There's no such thing as permanence. Everything changes every second. So, and yet, and this is one cause of misery in people's lives, people spend their whole life trying to create a permanent job, a permanent home, a permanent family, a permanent relationship, a permanent income, etc., etc. In a universe where change is the only certainty, no such thing as permanence. Now, when you live like that, you're going to be having constant downfalls because everything will change. Now, if you look at that from one step back, the only certainty in life is change. We are in a state of permanent change. So that now gives us a case for permanence because we are in permanent change.
Mm.
So does permanence exist? Only in that respect. Did that work for you?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, that for me is the same kind of concept as the reflection on time being, being in the moment or being a constant flow, right? I know that's different, but it's also the same, describing the same thing with different words, because I think if you reflect on, this kind of notion of, it's very hard to grasp time being anything other than a forward flow of events and perception of those events and involvement in those events versus, what you're then taught all the time in meditation, in Buddhism, and these other things is to kind of become present. And then you're always trying to understand, well, is that presence really there and does it exist, or is it just you glimpsing it for a moment? You know what, I'm going to end up asking one of the other subjects if I ask this question, but maybe, yeah, is that the same, is that kind of the same thing, or?
It's the same principle.
Yeah.
Many of these little I'm reluctant to call them laws, but I don't know what else to call it. These things, they're principles. There are several principles. Don't ask me what they are because I can't remember today, but there are several principles that the entire universe runs on. Scientists have their own version, strong force, weak force, magnetic force.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing. And the principles are, in order for absolute balance, there has to be paradox. Paradox, in the Taoist sense, is represented by the yin-yang. And that line in the middle of the yin-yang is the path of truth. And the paradox is the fact that you have black on one side with a seed of white in it, and you have white on the other side with a seed of black in it, and then you have the line down the middle. That's explaining what we're talking about now. If you were to meditate on that, your brain would come up with a flash of understanding by meditating, focusing on that particular symbol. I forgot what you asked me, but I'm pretty sure there was something there.
It's okay. You kind of answered it. But anyway, I've also got another question that's related. So to something we've talked about before, and I've also heard you talk to other people about on other podcasts, which is, I want to ask this in the context of free will. So I don't remember the question people have asked, but in your description of karma, I really like it when you use the analogy of a rabbit, right? So sometimes this kind of general understanding of karma is this kind of cause and effect, which I think is a very weak simile to karma, because it's much more about attraction than cause and effect. In other words, what you are is what you become. And it sounds a bit tacky, but that's how you kind of describe you're shagging around all the time. Sex is your biggest interest. Why wouldn't you just become a rabbit? You're going to, naturally your karmic journey, will you end up there? So and I am paraphrasing your description, so please pick it apart if it's not quite right. But the element of free will in that dynamic, I mean, the free will is what, you stopping to control what you're doing to change the outcome of that process, or not.
Well, only if you see that outcome as a negative thing.
I won't take that as a question, but I think it's a rhetorical one, I know. But
It's your will. It's your free will to shag like a rabbit. And you will get the natural consequence of that is you'll get exactly what you've shaped your brain and your being to be.
yeah,
That's not really karma, but it is. It's not karma because you're responsible for it. You've done it yourself. But it is karma in the fact that many, many years ago, before we understood these sciences, karma had a different connotation to it. We're still using, unfortunately, today, and this is a huge problem in the mystical path, we are using terminology that are hundreds, if not thousands of years old, and they don't cut it anymore. Language has to evolve as well. Language was designed to explain, let's say the language we had 2,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, was all designed around the world we lived in then. And every word we came up with was designed to express and represent the world that we had then and the things that were in it. We have a different world now. We think differently. We can do different things. We've found different powers of the mind. We have to change the terminology. We are used to scientific jargon today. It's succinct, it's precise. Whereas back in the day before these sciences, it wasn't so succinct, it wasn't so precise, it was very ambiguous at best.
that is a really valid point that I have pondered numerous times, which is that particularly when you learn things through through being quiet, through meditation, because you learn things without anyone telling you anything, which then we put words to those things. But what that gives you, and I've also had the same experience with psychedelics and in all sorts of other situations actually, but there is a real lack of available language, which somewhat surprises me why that is, because actually we've developed so many other things and not really gone on to much develop language much more to and also many of these concepts, though they're not new concepts, it's just language has evolved, I suppose, in many ways, but not in a way to describe some of these things. I don't know if that's maybe better, maybe not good. I don't know what your reflection on that is, but
different tools for different jobs. When you know something, your knowing is pure. You know you don't feel very well. You know you love somebody. You don't have pictures or concepts of these things. So when you know something, it is pure. You can't tamper with it. So that's spiritual knowing, mind knowing. It's invisible, but you know it. As soon as you turn that into a picture form, into a thought, it's now delineated. It's not pure anymore. Your brain will then set about, once it's done that, it can now add opinions to that knowing. It can now add different colors. It can change the shape of the picture. It can warp it. It can change the definition of the knowing. It can screw around with it as much as it likes, and it usually does before it even comes to our attention that we're thinking it. So the knowing becomes extremely bastardized and warped in the thought process. But the monkey we inhabit can't get its little head around these spiritual knowings if it doesn't have a picture, because the brain thought is purely designed to quantify the issues of matter and what matter does. This will kill you, this will make you better, this da 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 da. So it needs to be able to warp and change things around inside the brain in order to get its little head around it. Spirit, on the other hand, is just pure knowing. It just knows. It doesn't need to think about it. It's pure. So, and this is why you hear things like when you get out of your brain, when you get out of the body, when you leave your ego behind for a little while, it's all just pure knowing, just pure love. People, they have near-death experiences, they come back, and the only words they can say about it is it was just pure love. It's just pure knowing. They can't describe it. You've got to go and do it. And that's the difference.
I think we got it. I think we sussed that one. And
love it.
I think for anyone watching or listening, why not ask your questions? Any other questions on free will, put them in. GM will if he gets time, will answer them. If not, if it's on my channel, I'll also answer them or reach out to him for answers. So yeah, look, thanks again. I'm loving these snippets and look forward to the next one.
Always a pleasure, Matt. Always, my friend. And thank you everyone for supporting this channel.
Cheers.
And we love you all.
This is 1095.